The Doc URI, or Data First approach, is an easy method to perform create, retrieve, update, and delete operations on your database from a table or repeat control in your form. The best part is, using our powerful database connector, you don't need programming. In this example, we use the sample database classic models, which contains a table named products. We plan to let our users select a product line, then show a table that contains all the products in that product line. The database table on which you want to perform CRUD operations must include a unique key column, like the product code column in our products table. We've chosen to include just a few columns for simplicity. We will allow the user to view the products for any product line, add a product to the product line by adding a table row, update any product by editing the data in the table, and delete any product by deleting a table row. Running the form again shows the updated info in the database, which tells us that the operations did execute. In this video, we will quickly create a form that aligns with the database schema and link the form to the database without writing any business rules or code. We'll follow 3 basic steps. First, we'll add SQL statements that tell our database connector what information to get from and send to the database. Next, we'll generate a schema that allows us to add form controls that match our database table columns. Finally, we'll create the form and set Doc URIs to automatically read from and write to our database. Let's start by putting your SQL statements in a file where the frevvo database connector can find and execute them. This file is named configuration.xml. We have defined a database connector query element and given it a unique name, all products. All of our SQL statements, select, insert, update, and delete, are declared in this same all products query. This will allow us to perform CRUD operations on the products table in a single form submission. This query must also contain the attributes autoCreate equals true, autoDelete equals true, and delete key equals product code, or the table's unique key. These attributes allow you to use the method put to insert and delete rows in addition to updating them all at the same time. Notice that some values are passed using variables in curly braces. These tell the database connector where to find the values in your form's submission document. In our example, we have a second query that selects all the product lines from the product lines table. We'll use this to dynamically populate a drop-down control to filter our results right in our form. Next, we need to generate an XSD schema, which we will use to create form controls that map to our database columns. Construct your database URL to test your query with the server and port /database/query set name from your configuration.xml file /query name also from your configuration.xml file. In this case, our select statement includes a where condition, so we will also need to specify the value of that condition in the URL. The URL parameter name must match the configuration.xml variable name in your where condition. The value to the right of the equal sign must be such that the statement will return a row from your database. In this case, we know ships is a valid product line. Now add /schema just after the query name, but before the parameter. The result is an XML schema that describes the table columns as XSD elements. Save it as an XSD file. frevvo will be able to read this and use it to generate controls in your form that match the table columns. Now let's log into frevvo and create a form that is connected to our database. Create a new project. Open the Schemas tab. Click the blue plus icon and open the schema.xsd file you just created. You can provide a name and description too, which is helpful if you have multiple schemas. Click Forms and Workflows and then Create a new form. Drag and drop a drop-down control to your form. Set the label to Select Product Line and the name to PL. Change the option source to Web Service. Set the options URL property to the database URL for the query product lines. Since our database has user-friendly product line names, we'll use the product line for both the options value and label. From here, we can test the form and see that the dropdown shows a list of product lines from the database. To learn more about the Dynamic Options feature, check out our Dynamic Options documentation and video. Next, we'll add the table that will show you all the products in a given product line, just like the query we tested earlier, but in a much friendlier layout for your users. On the Data Sources tab, click New from XSD. Expand the All Products line, which represents your schema, and then click the green plus icon to add the All Products document to your Data Sources tab. In the Data Sources tab, click the green plus beside the newly added All Products document. Notice that a section control named All Products with a repeat control inside it gets automatically added to the top of your form. We'll customize these controls so they look nice for our users. Drag and drop the All Products section below your drop-down control. Change the label of All Products section to give the user some context about which product line is being queried. We'll use the control template PL, which at runtime will display the value selected from the drop-down, and the default text product line, which will display whenever no value is picked. Click the repeat control. While this approach would work exactly the same with a repeat control, in this case, we think a table layout is easier for our users. Change the control type from repeat to table. Notice that your table has columns corresponding to your database columns. If desired, you can make further customizations to the table, such as modifying the column widths, labels, etc. However, there are some changes you cannot make, such as checking or unchecking the required property. When we use the data first approach, frevvo automatically names our controls to match our database column names and protects us from making changes that would cause the SQL statements in our configuration.xml file to fail. See the documentation for changes you can and cannot make to controls from schema. You've made it to the last step of editing. We'll set the Doc URIs, which tell our form which database connector queries to execute at runtime. Go to Settings Editing Mode. Select the Document Actions tab and then the Send Data subtab. Select the option Manually Set Doc URIs. On the document All Products, the one you pulled in as a data source, we will set a read URL with the method get, which maps to the select statement in our query, and a write URL with the method put, which will map to the insert, create, and delete statements. These URLs are constructed similarly to the browser test URL. This URL points to the location of the database connector, the query set name, and the query name with the parameter $pline equals, which is the variable used in the where condition of our select statement. The template PL will resolve to the value of the dropdown in our form, which will be a valid product line since the options are populated dynamically from our database. Notice that we've added the syntax exclamation and code equals true inside the template. Since some of the product lines contain spaces and a valid URL cannot contain a space, this will ensure that the spaces are encoded correctly. It's a good idea to encode templates used in URLs when the value might contain spaces or special characters. Set the read URL method to get. In this case, our write URL is exactly the same. You don't always need the parameter on the write URL, but because the select statement is in the same query as the delete statement and uses a where condition, we must include the parameter on the write URL as well. Select the write URL method put. The put method, which typically maps to update statements, will also perform create and delete statements as long as the query contains the attributes autoCreate equals true, autoDelete equals true, and delete key equals product code, or your table's unique key. That's it. You're ready to test the form. Simply click the Save and Test icon to run your form and see the database connector at work. Select a product line and notice that the form table will automatically expand and display all the products retrieved by the select statement. Add a row and enter some data. Edit another row and delete a different row. Submit the form. The database connector will execute the insert statement for any row that was added, the update statement for any row that was changed, and the delete statement for any row that was deleted. Run the form one more time to see that all these operations were completed. So, what is happening behind the scenes? When you use the Doc URI approach to create, update, and delete rows, the controls in your form are bound to the schema or data source from which they were created. When the form is submitted, frevvo creates an XML document which conforms to that schema. This XML document has all the values entered in those schema controls. When the form is submitted, this XML document is sent to the frevvo database connector. The database connector can get the control values directly from the document and use them while executing the SQL statement. Today you've learned how to use frevvo forms and the frevvo database connector to perform CRUD operations on your database with no programming at all, using the Doc URI approach. Thanks for watching!